Hello everybody, welcome back. I'm Lisa with Lisa Capen Quilts, and today we're making this. This is a fun little Shamrock Mugrug. We're doing foundation paper piecing for a portion of this mug rug, but this is a perfect size mug rug to use as a snack mat. You can place a drink and a snack. I love mug rugs because you can use them in place of paper towels. You could hang this up on the fridge, on the wall, on your side table. All kinds of different uses. It's the perfect size little project. And today we're doing foundation paper piecing, right? I'm switching it up a little bit today. I have my light pad. I'm just going to throw in an optional way of doing paper piecing. You might think it's faster this way. You might stick to the way you have been doing it. There's so many different ways to do it, right? Before the mystery quilt starts on March the 8th, I'm just trying to give you another optional way to think about trying before we start that foundation paper piecing quilt project, right? March the 8th is when we start that. So let's go down and take a look at some of the pieces that make up this mug rug, right? So this mug rug consists of 4 little foundation paper piecing units, right? The other section to the right is just one solid square of fabric. The other side, the clover side, consists of these 4 different pieces. So we have one that looks like this. This is the stem of our clover. The other 3 pieces look identical except for the numbers, and the letters are placed in different sections, right? So you have 3 pieces of the clover and 1 of the stem. So let's just talk about the letters and the numbers on these foundations, because when you first see it, you're like, what is all this stuff going on? It's so confusing. But let me just make it simple for you, okay? So each one of these sections are labeled A, B, C, and D, right? Everything on this template will be A, B, 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 B. It's just labeling the sections. But you'll see A1, A2, A3, 4, 5, and 6, and 7. These are the numbers and the order in which we're adding the pieces, right? So we'll start down here and then add the 2nd, the 3rd, the 4th, the 5th, the 6th, and 7th. Then you'll see a red letter in each one of these sections. With this pattern, you get tracing templates to pre-cut your fabrics if that's what you want to do, right? So for each one of those little templates, that's what the red letter is for, right there. And then you're going to see on my templates that I have marked them myself with a marker because I'm using 2 different greens, a solid and a pattern. And I don't want to mix up where I'm placing my solid and patterned fabrics. So I just marked it right here on each one of the foundations. So I know that when I'm cutting the fabric for A2, the 2nd fabric, I'm going to be using the C template to pre-cut my fabric, and I'm going to make sure that I'm cutting the solid fabric and not the patterned fabric, right? So you might find it helpful to make notes all over your foundations if that helps you stay organized with all the fabrics that you're using, right? I make notes all over mine. So that's what the handwritten letters stand for. So you have your templates and the order in which you're adding all of your pieces. Now usually in each one of my paper piecing videos, I'll tell you, pre-fold on the solid line in between each one of your positions. We're not doing that today. Instead, I have my light pad here. So let me just turn this on. Turn on. This is the right side of my paper foundation. When I place it right side facing down on my light pad, I can very easily see where each one of these positions are and the sewing line right in between each one of these different sections. That's why it's really handy to have your light pad. I'm going to save a lot of time not pre-folding on each one of these lines, which I think when the mystery quilt comes up and there's so many different units to do each week, that's going to save a load of time. So stay with me for a little bit. We're going to do one of these sections together, and we're going to do the stem together. And we'll start with the stem because it has the less amount of pieces to add to it. Okay, there we go. And just letting you know that you can get this mug rug pattern down in the description box below. There's a link. It takes you right over to my Etsy shop. Okay, so that's where you can get this pattern. We're going to start with this unit right here. I feel like I'm forgetting to tell you something, but just to let you know, I've recorded this video about 4 times, messing up. The microphone's not working. One time I recorded the whole section and I didn't even have the camera recording. Okay, so I feel like this is all deja vu, like I've been here before. We're going to start with this one right here. So on this particular unit, which is your D unit, you'll see D1, D2, D3, D4. We're going to be adding this fabric first, right? That's using the E template, and I have not even pre-cut all of my fabrics yet, which usually I have them off to the side and ready to go. But I'm going to show you, I'm going to save a little bit of time and cut the fabrics as I go. So there's the E template is right here. I'm going to grab that. And D2, that's the second fabric we're adding. That uses the D template. Let me grab that one. Where's my, oh, there's my D template. And for that one, I know I'm going to use the patterned fabric, okay? So here's what I have. Here's some offcuts of fabric from another project I was working on. I have a background fabric, I have a solid fabric, and a patterned fabric. Now you might choose something totally different, right? But for this, for mine, that's what I'm using. These are my 3 colors. And I haven't pre-cut anything. Now the only part that really stinks, I love this as a background fabric, but it's hard to tell, especially on camera, which way is the right side and the wrong side of the fabric. So I have to really focus on that. When we're cutting out our pieces using these templates, we want to make sure that the fabric is facing with the right side facing up. Okay, so I have my little template. I'm just going to lay it on, and I like to cut my fabrics just a little bit bigger than the paper template. I do give you 1/4 of an inch extra fabric on your templates, but I like to make it a little bit bigger than that. So I'm just going to cut it like that. And one of the things I love about foundation paper piecing is I don't have to be exact or precise cutting these fabrics out. So for the D fabric, I'm going to bring over my patterned fabric. We're going to lay that with the right side facing up. And I can just find a little section just like that. Actually, I find it much easier just to lay it right here. I'm working in a small little space and just use my rotary cutter. See that? There we go. So there's my D fabric. Again, that was the right side facing up when cutting out that fabric. So I'm done with these templates for a minute. And now let's bring over this light pad. So today I'm going to be using my light pad. I'm going to be using an Elmer's glue stick. I'm going to be using a seam roller, and I'll iron my pieces once all the fabrics have been added to the paper foundation. Okay, you can iron them with your iron as you go along if you want to. I'm just trying not to stick my glue to the fabric as much, so I'm going to be using my seam roller. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look and we're going to see which one of these sections has the 1. So there's D1. Let's flip this over. I'm going to add a little bit of glue. Small little dots of glue right in that position. Now let me just check right side. The first fabric we're adding to this, we're placing that fabric down with the right side of the fabric facing up. So we want to make sure we go beyond the paper template and beyond the sewing line between 1 and 2. Just like that. And I'm just going to finger press. Now when we flip this back over, we can easily see that that fabric extends beyond that sewing line right there. Now it's going to go over more than 1/4 of an inch, and I'm fine with that, okay? It also extends beyond that paper edge. So now, whoops, it didn't stick. We had some more glue. It didn't stick. This is how my day has been going, y'all. It's been going exactly just like this. Let me really finger press that down. Do you ever just have some days where you think, it would probably be better if I just go watch movies today or go back to bed for a little while? That's been my day. Okay. So let's bring this back over. And really so much, you could use the light pad for this or not. We're going to be turning it just like this. Yeah, let's bring the light pad in so I can show you. So there is the fabric for position number 2, right? And there's my pre-cut piece. It's going in that same direction. See that? So now when we add it, we're going to flip the right side facing down onto the first fabric. Now I'm going to pick these up and I'm going to bring these over, and we're sewing on the line between the first position and position number 2. We're going to be sewing from off the paper. I like starting off the paper. If the line comes to this solid line all the way around, I'll go ahead and just sew from off the edge of the paper. And it comes to that edge. I'm just going to keep on going right off the edge of the paper. Let's go do that one. So at my sewing machine, I have a straight stitch set, and I've lowered the stitch length to a 1.6. I could even go a little bit lower and still be fine. We want to sew with a shorter stitch length so that the paper removes off of the fabric when we're all done much easier. And y'all, I'm just using regular cheap copy paper. This is a 20-pound copy paper, and that's what I'm using today. Okay, let's go to the sewing machine. Okay, here we are, and I'm just pinching everything in place, right? And we're sewing between D1 and D2. So there is our first seam. Now coming back, since we sewed directly through the paper, even though we haven't pre-folded any of these sewing lines, that sewing through the paper makes it a lot easier to now fold that paper back right on that seam. See how easy that was? And now we can trim up the extra fabric that extends beyond that fold or that seam. You can use a 1/4 inch seam or add a 1/4 inch ruler if you wanted to, if you have one. A lot of people don't, so I just want to show you. You could take a regular pair of scissors and just eyeball it, leaving roughly a 1/4 of an inch. Again, I just eyeballed it, but that's about a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. See that? So now we're going to come back here, and I'm going to add a tiny little bit of glue right there and right there. Small little smidgens. And we're going to fold that fabric right over. Now I'm just going to take my fingernail and just score that fabric a little bit. And just finger press that right into the glue. You can even use a seam roller or an iron if you want to. I find the paper releases off a little bit easier if I don't use any heat, but there's many times when I do iron these seams as we go along too. So now let's flip that over, and you'll see that fabric extends beyond the next sewing line, which is perfect. And we're going to be adding D3 right down here in this corner. That uses the E template, and I'm going to be cutting from the background fabric. So let me get my E template. My fabric is facing the right side, facing up. So I'm just going to cut myself off a piece like this. Now I love applique, so I save tons and tons of scraps for applique. But saving your scraps for paper piecing is also awesome, because you're just cutting pieces off just like this, right? All right, so there's the fabric for D3. I'm going to fold that over. D3 is going to be situated just like that, right? That's the right side facing up. And then we're going to just flip it right on over. Depending on how much fabric is, okay, so I wanted to show you, see how much fabric is extending beyond that line. Instead of just pre-trimming that, I'm just going to keep in mind that I have more than 1/4 of an inch there, right? And so when I add this fabric, I'm just going to scoot it down a smidgen, like that. Just making sure that that fabric extends beyond that cutting line, which it does. There we go. So that's what it looks like. We're going to bring this over to the sewing machine. All right, here we go. So now we can just fold that paper right on over and trim away the extra fabric there. See that? I'm going to add just a smidgen of glue right there. And we're going to fold that fabric over and just finger press it. Okay, so all we have left on this particular unit, this stem unit, is this little piece down here, D4. Now, if I were doing traditional piecing, that would be so hard for me. That's going to actually finish as a tiny, tiny little triangle down there, right? Another reason why I love paper piecing is because this is going to finish precise and so accurate, and I don't have to sweat the tiny little pieces, right? So this is using the F template. Let me find my little F template. And a little background piece of fabric. There we go. I'm going to use that tiny little scrap. There we go. Which way is the right way? All right, that's the right side up. And then I'm going to turn it over like this, right side facing up. It's going to be added like that, right side facing down. And I just want to make sure that it's going to be caught in that sewing line. So that's what it's going to look like on that side, right? But it just does go beyond that sewing line right there. And I'm just pinching these pieces in place at this point. You could use a pin to hold that in place if you wanted to. It's kind of a tiny little piece. You can even look up, right? So here's the sewing line. When you flip that over, does that fabric extend past that line? If so, you're good. Okay, so it looks really haphazard, doesn't it? Let's flip this back over. Now, in some of the sections on these foundations, if you have started off the paper's edge and sewn through that seam allowance, which I like to do, then you have sewn through other sections previously before you've gotten to this section, right? So you have two little seams there. I just take my fingers and just pre-rip that paper because we still do, even though this was the last piece, we still want to fold that paper back and trim the extra bulkiness away from that seam allowance. Just like we have done with all the seams prior to that, right? So there we go. And now we can go ahead. I don't want to lose that little template. I'm just going to do a little tiny smidgen of glue right there and fold that fabric over and give that a little finger press right in place. So that is all of the fabrics for, let's see, this is the D foundation, right? And you'll see all the way around the fabric extends beyond the paper's edge all the way around. Now let's just go ahead and give this a good little press. I have to heat up my iron. While that's heating up, I can just straighten up a little bit. Foundation paper piecing is so precise without a lot of fussy cutting, measuring, sewing so accurately, but you make little slivers, so you tend to make a mess, right? Before we trim this block up, I'm going to go ahead and just give it a good press. I'm not using any steam at this point, right? Just a good hot iron, nice and dry. We can give that a good press.
After pressing each one of your units, you'll want to just square them up using a rotary cutter and a ruler and matching the inside solid line to the 1/4 inch line on your ruler and trim away everything else.
Okay, now that we are done with this first little section, we're going to move on to one of these sections, and I'm going to do one of these with you, but you're going to actually make 3 units that look exactly just like this, right? So let's move that section off to the side. And what I've done is I've split up the screen, so we're not going back and forth. And I think this will be much faster. I can come over here and sew the seam, and over here is where I'm doing all of the work getting the fabrics ready, right? So on this one, we're working with the A unit. A1 starts down here in this little corner. I'm going to be using the A template. Let me get my little templates over. And I'm cutting this from a background fabric. So we'll just cut that little piece to the basic shape of that paper template. And we're right down here in this corner. I'm going to flip that over and add just a smidgen of glue stick right there. Again, with the fabric facing right side up on this first fabric, we're going to lay that right over top. I'm just going to finger press that glue right on in there. And we're going to take a look at it from the back side. You'll see I have a little bit more than 1/4 inch of fabric extending beyond that sewing line. So we'll just keep that in mind when we're adding our second fabric, which we're going to be using the C template. And this is where my little note comes in handy. I'm going to be using a solid fabric for my piece number 2 on this particular foundation, right? So I'm just going to give myself the basic little shape and cut my fabric just like that. So we can flip this right on over. This fabric, if we lift this back up, we can see the basic shape, right? It's going to go on in that orientation. So there's my fabric, and I'm going to lay that right side facing down. I'm going to pinch that in place and sew on that first line. Now we're coming back. Because I've sewn through the paper, it folds back really easy now. And we can trim away that extra fabric. And I know the camera is much darker over here on this side. It's because this light is on. I have not yet figured out a way to regulate the lighting if I have my light pad on. So now we're going to add a little smidgen of glue in that second position and flip that fabric right on over. I have had all kinds of technical difficulties today. Hopefully I'll edit them all out. Okay, so there's our second fabric. Let's flip this over. And now you'll see, because I've really cut this fabric a lot bigger than it needed to be, that fabric covers all of position number 2 and most of position number 3. So if you wanted, you could trim a little bit off of that right now, right? So what I'm going to do is just take a pin off to the side. I'm going to make a mark where that sewing line is. And I know that I want to leave at least 1/4 of an inch beyond that. But I can just trim up some of this. Like that, right? I have to re-put my glue because I just took it off. Okay. So see, that is much shorter now. So the third fabric, we're going to be using the B template. And just know that when you're doing this and you get in the groove of things, things move through very quickly. I'm really kind of explaining my steps as I go along and taking my time, but I really do feel like this is pretty fast, especially since we didn't have to pre-fold all of these templates. So let me scoot that off to the side. For this fabric, I'm going to be using a patterned fabric. The right side is facing up. I'm going to cut this shape of my fabric. There we go. All right, and so we're adding that just so I can show you. That piece has a slant that's going just like that, right? So this piece has the slant going just like that. Now we can add it just like that, turning the right side facing down. And again, we just want to make sure that that fabric goes beyond that sewing line right there. Okay, we're coming back. Let's flip that pattern, that paper right on over. We're going to trim that extra bulky fabric away. We're going to add a little bit of glue in that third position. And we're flipping and pressing. We're going to come back, and our fourth fabric is going to be a solid, or for me, it's a solid, and I'm using the G template. And I can even just use my rotary cutter right here. Okay, we're going to flip this over. One, two, three, four. Yep. So the G fabric has the slant that's going this way, right? So if we lay it like that, the slant's going that way. We can flip it right side facing down. Now I know I have a lot of extra fabric that goes beyond that sewing line, right? So I can scoot that fabric down just a little bit, and I kind of find it easier if I just do it holding the fabric up like this. But I do think it saves a lot of time not trimming as we go along, right? Trimming after we do the stitching. So on the back side, that's what it looks like. Over here, you can lift this up. Whoops, there you go. There's my sewing line, and there's the fabric. It is beyond the sewing line. Now on this one, you'll notice that it does not come all the way to the end. It comes right there on that line. So when I come right here, I'm going to do one stitch. I like to go one stitch beyond that sewing line right there. That way I don't have to do any back stitching. I'm not worried about this stitching coming out, because when we add this piece on that line, it's going to lock that stitch in place. It just does go right beyond, oops, so there you go, right beyond that line. See that? Okay. We'll come back over here. We'll fold up on the line that we just stitched. Fold that paper back and trim. We'll add a little bit of glue. Flip and press. Again, you'll see I have lots of extra fabric there. I could go ahead and just trim off a little bit if I wanted to, just a smidgen. See that? And I have just about 1/4 of an inch beyond that next sewing line. So now we are adding piece A5, which uses the C template, and I'm using a patterned fabric. You certainly don't have to cut your pieces quite as big as what I'm doing. I like to make sure I have enough. Okay, let's flip this over. This piece has a short end at the top and the long seam down here at the bottom. And it is situated just like that, right? So we're going to take it and flip it right side over. And now we are sewing that seam. Coming back, I really don't know that we have too much extra on that particular seam. We don't, so I'm just going to leave it. Smidgen of glue, flip and press. This time I'm not even going to worry about trimming all that extra. See, that extra goes way beyond there. That's okay. The 6th fabric we're adding uses the A template and a background fabric. I'm just looking to see if I have any little scraps that I can use. I do not, so I'm going to cut myself a piece. Right side, dark side. Okay. So this one, I'm just going to be really mindful. I'm just going to hold it up here. Right side. The triangle goes like that. We're going to flip it down. And I'm just making sure, and I'm sorry, I find it much easier to do holding it up just like this. I'm going to lower it just a little bit so that it's just positioned beyond that sewing line, and that's what it looks like from the back side. So coming back, we can flip this paper over, and we are trimming that extra fabric. See that? Smidgen of glue. And pressing that right in there. Okay, we only have one more fabric to add, and that is a 7, again using the A template. Let's see, let's cut from that corner. Right side, dark side. That piece is going to be added just like that. And we're going to flip that over. Right side facing down. And I'm going to just make sure that that fabric goes beyond that sewing line. Hello, hello. Oh, I thought my microphone stopped working again. Okay, so there's that piece. This is one of the pieces that we have sewn through previously. So I'm just going to take my fingernail and just separate those seams or that paper, right? There we go. Flip those papers back. And we're going to cut all the extra bulkiness of that fabric away. A little bit of glue. Let me get my iron warming up. We're going to flip that fabric over and press those seams. So this is what she looks like from the front side, and we haven't trimmed anything up, right? And this is what it looks like from the back side. You'll notice that the fabric extends beyond the paper all the way around. I cut it close, a little bit short right there, but that's okay. So let me just give this a good little press. And I'm just pressing. I'm not stretching that fabric. It's just up and down, pressing like this. No steam. And now you can go ahead and trim the extra fabric all the way around. So I'll go do that. And then I have 2 more units just like this to do. There's a total of 3 of these all together. And then we'll come back when I have all 4 of my foundations sewn and ready to piece together. Alrighty, I have all 4 foundations sewn and trimmed, right? The order we're going to put them in is A, B, C, and D. They still have the paper on the back, which is going to be really helpful because I'm getting ready to sew them, still using my shorter seam allowance, right? We're going to flip, just like a 4-patch, we're going to flip this side right over. We're going to flip this side right over. I'm just going to line these up using the paper foundations, right? And we're going to be sewing right on that line, and that gives us an accurate 1/4 inch seam allowance. So we'll come over here to the sewing machine and we'll sew these 2 seams. All right, we're going to get this iron heating up. Here's our two foundations. I'm going to scoot this over just a little bit. Oh, it was stuck. On technical difficulties for today. There's these two pieces. What I like to do is work from the paper side. I'm going to work that seam over to one side. And then I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to work that seam to the other side. And then I'm going to go right in the middle. I'm going to open that seam completely open and just work it with my finger. You could use your seam roller too, but we're going to press that seam open just like that. Pressing, pressing, pressing. There we go. We're going to let that one cool off, and we're going to do the same thing with this one. We're going to work that seam one way and work it the other way. And then reach right in the middle and open it up. I'm still using a dry iron, even though I love to use steam. Steam tends to warp the paper a little bit, so I'm using a dry iron. Okay, now we can flip this over. So there's the bottom half of my clover. And here is the top half of my clover. And now we're just flipping that right over. This seam here should match up with that seam there. If you feel more comfortable adding a pin right there, you could absolutely do that. We're going to be sewing right along on that line, that seam there that joins these two sections. Okay, we're coming back here. Just like we did before, we're going to just flip this over to the paper side. I'm going to work that seam one way. And then work that seam back the other way. Now, because this is a 4-patch, we're going to have quite a bulky center. And if you wanted to, you could go ahead and start removing some of this paper. I'm going to open up this seam first. I'm going to press it with the paper in. You could even cut the threads in these seams here and get those seams to spin around if you wanted to. I'm usually not very good at doing that. I'm going to just start pressing this and see what I think about that intersection right in the middle. And I think I'm okay with that. So that's what the back side looks like. Now at this point, our clover is completely done. Isn't that so pretty? So there's my clover. I'm going to go ahead and press it from the front side too. This one I really can press down with some good pressure right in the middle. And then to finish off this mug rug, you're going to have a section off to the right? That's just one solid block that's cut, and that's going to be sewn to the right. Now, you could certainly add that on there now without removing the paper. I'm going to go ahead and start taking this paper off, right? So let me show you what I like to do. Now comes the messy job of removing all the papers, right? When I do that, I like to have a couple of little tools. This is my sharp little pokey tool from the Dollar Tree. You could use a toothpick, a pen, something that has a little point to it. I like to use this, and I just run it along those seams sometimes to rescore that paper. Makes it really easy just to go in and grab it and pull it out. And then sometimes you get little pieces of paper that are really tiny and maybe hard to grab. Like, see the paper in that seam right there? Right there. If you have a pair of tweezers, it's sometimes handy to have just to reach in there and grab the paper out, right? Sometimes the paper will rip, leaving tiny little corners like that. I find it really helpful to have a pair of tweezers to reach in and grab those little corners. So now we're just going to go through and remove each one of the papers. And that's going to take me a minute, so I'll fast forward this part.
I do really think that I should have used a much smaller stitch length. I would have had an easier time ripping through the copy paper. 1.6 was still a little bit too long of a stitch length. I'm thinking like a 1.2 or a 1.
So there we go. The paper is all removed. Sometimes, depending on my mood, I find it very relaxing to pick off the paper from the back side. And sometimes, again, depending on my mood, I find it so monotonous to pick the paper off from the back side. But I absolutely love paper piecing because it's just so precise, right? So now all that's left to finish the top of this little mug rug is to sew the seam that connects this unit to this plain block of fabric. So we're just going to line that up. I'm going to switch my foot over to a regular pressing foot, and we're going to sew that with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Right back. I'm just going to flip this seam right on over towards that big block. Just pressing that seam over to the side. And here is the top of my mug rug all done. So now all I have to do is create the layers, do some quilting, and add a binding. I'm going to go turn on some music and do that part. Isn't that going to be the perfect size? Little drink, little snack. All right, we'll be right back. Also, one thing that I was thinking of while I was doing removing the paper is, wouldn't it just be cute to not add this portion and make it a mug rug and just do this as a little quilt block? Its own little tiny quilt, or make several of these into like a centerpiece for a table, right? Wouldn't that be so cute? All right, I'm gonna go create the layers, do a simple little quilting. I think that all I'm gonna do for my quilting is stitch the ditch between the 4-piece and here. I might do a little something here, and I might not. I might just continue and do a simple mock 4-piece over here. 4-patch. Yeah, today's been a long day, y'all. I'm gonna go do some quilting.
I decided for my quilting, I would just do a simple little grid over in the blank space of this mug rug. So with my friction fine liner, I just marked off equal sections, and now I'm just stitching a straight stitch right over my grid and right through the seams of my 4-patch.
And here she is with her binding. Isn't that so pretty? I just used a different grain for the binding, but I think it works, right? Very simple quilting. I love that about this particular project. Look at that. And here's what she looks like from the back. Perfect size little snack mat. Perfect for the refrigerator, right? I even think you could do some kind of monograms, some kind of embroidery here in this space if you wanted to customize this project. All kinds of different possibilities, right? I hope that showing you a different way of doing paper piecing might have sparked some interest for the paper piecing using the light pad, right? I do believe that that's the direction I'm going to go with my mystery quilt since I'm sewing through the paper on that particular project. I think it's going to save a lot of time not pre-folding all of the lines on my templates. I do think so. All right, you know what? If you make this mug rug, I would love to see it. Feel free to jump down to the Creative Crew. There's a link in the description box below. Join me there and share pictures of your mug rug if you make it. And if you don't do Facebook, there is a link to my Etsy. You can send me pictures in a message on Etsy, which is fantastic that they do that. All right, everybody, until I see you next time, have a lot of fun with this. And yeah, try this paper piecing out using a light pad and let me know what you think down in the comment section below. Okay, everybody, I will see y'all soon. Okay, bye.